grew up extremely poor. My parents did not know Christ. My mom and dad liked to recreationally smoke pot, and in our home that was a normal, natural thing. I literally woke up and there was a bong next to my bed and I would have a hit. In the bathroom, I'd have a hit. In my car, I'd have a hit. At school, I'd smoke at school. I'd smoke after school. I'd have to smoke to go to sleep. By the time I was 15, I had become my parents' dealer, and I made extra money by selling weed on the side. By the time I was 18, I was managing kitchen restaurants, and I was working in this kitchen. And one night, the owner's friend, who was a middle school English teacher, showed up, and she was helping out a couple nights a week as a waitress. We began to date. She got pregnant with twins, and I was 19 years old at the time, and this was totally the opposite for anything for me, because I was just consumed with living a party lifestyle, doing what I wanted to, when I wanted to, with whoever I wanted to, and now I'm going to be a father, and I don't know what to do. The backstory of all of this is that my wife, she grew up knowing who Christ was and having made a commitment to Christ at a very young age, and by the time she met me, she wasn't living for Christ at all. I knew they weren't supposed to live. And not only did they live, but they came home and they didn't have all of the things wrong with them that the doctor said was going to be wrong with them. God really used that story and that situation to get my wife's attention. She knew that it was time to come back to the Lord. My wife comes to me one day and she says, I need to get back in church, and if you want to go, I want you to go, but I'm going to go whether you go or not. I thought, okay, church, that's an okay thing. So we went to this church and I just began to listen, and I just began to have God gradually break through my hard heart and start to speak to me. I could not shake this feeling that there was something more that God wanted from me, and I didn't know what it was. I was the second person in the water and dove in. The thing was upside down. I actually ended up pulling both of those guys out of the water and into boats, and I found out later that I pulled 2 dead guys out of the ocean, and that was my first real experience with death that I remember. That really messed with me because that was supposed to be me, and for whatever reason, I was spared from that. I had 2 nights when we got back home that I could not sleep because I was faced with my own mortality, and I knew that if I died that I would have gone to hell because I was separated from God. And I said to my wife, Dawn, call the pastor of that church and ask him if he'll come and talk to me. I've got some questions I want to ask him. And I asked him every question I could ask him about the Bible, and that night I trusted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. The following Sunday I was baptized. It was Easter of 1997, and I felt like God wanted me to do something, and I wanted to serve Christ. I began to sense that God wanted me to preach, and so I went and talked to the pastor about that, and he recommended I started to work on a sermon, and so I did. On the Saturday night that I finished working on the sermon, the pastor called me and he said, Joe, I'm sick, and I won't be able to preach tomorrow. I know you've been working on the sermon. Is there any way you could preach for me tomorrow? And so I said, sure, I'll be glad to. And then I hung up the phone and got ready to throw up. What did I do? The next morning came and I took the little bit of notes I was trying to figure out. I got in the pulpit, and when I got behind the pulpit, it was as if my soul gave a sigh of relief. Like God was trying to get me there, and he had finally gotten me there. And when I got to the end of the sermon, I was so dumb. I didn't even know how to close the sermon. I looked at the people, and then I looked at the end of my notes and said, well, that's all I've got to say. And I went and I sat down. After the service, people came up to me with tears in their eyes about how God had spoken to them and what God was doing in their life. And I knew that wasn't for me because I didn't even know what I was doing. I couldn't even close the thing. I was driving in Miami one day, and the radio came on, and it was this guy. And it was preaching like I had never heard before, and it just went right to my heart. And God used that message in my life in such a powerful way. And I thought, God, if I ever get a chance to grow, I want to preach like this guy. Who is this? And I found out that it was this guy named James McDonald, this program called Walk in the Word. And so then I began to find all of the messages I could from this Walk in the Word guy. I started to learn theology, and I started to learn preaching from listening. And so in a lot of ways, I learned what I knew about church from Walk in the Word and from James McDonald, and then this church that he was a part of called Harvest Bible Chapel. I was at a place where I said, God, if you would ever let me be a part of a church like that, I would go in a heartbeat. When we walked into Harvest Chattanooga and those core group meetings, we knew we were home. We knew that this was the place that God was going to use in our life in a great way, and he did. We had an opportunity to come and to learn all aspects of ministry from Harvest. So we served at Harvest Chattanooga faithfully from day one with the goal of coming here and planting one day with the Harvest Bible Fellowship. We are so excited to be at the training center. The guys here are phenomenal, and I get to learn from them, and they're teaching me, and I'm learning what ministry should look like, and I get to go and plant a life-giving church in a community and get to see God's name spread among the nations and the fame of Jesus Christ grow. It's one of the greatest joys of my life, and it is an undeserved gift and grace from God that I get to be a part of the Harvest Bible Chapel and the Harvest Bible Fellowship and plant.